What's happening, everyone? Fancy seeing you here again. I just saw you about an hour and a half ago doing AI week. Come by, doing every stream this week at either 2 or 5 o'clock Eastern, doing AI and crypto content creation, making websites, how to use GPT, all the AI, all that fun stuff. Really could 10x you in a lot of different verticals. So just wanted to say, be doing that every day, along with other streams, such as this one today. I got Access Alive in the house. So we're pumping here on the channel, RHMax.tv. We're pumping this week. We've been pumping for a while. This is like my, I would say like 15th day streaming in a row. No, more than that, 17, I think. And yeah, I feel more compelled to go here and spread the good word with a bunch of cool people I know who actually know what's going on when prices are up and down, that sort of thing. Before pre-glory, that's what we're calling it, pre-glory. So anyways, very excited to get AI week going on this week. Got streams in between. Got Ben Sierra coming on, going over latest hex stats and stuff on Thursday. And today I've been excited for this one. We're going to get into it in just a minute. But again, everyone, just want to ask you a simple question. Is your body ready? That's it. Without further ado, welcome back to the show. Access Alive.
What is going on, my friend? How is everybody doing out there? Hope you're all doing well.
Everyone's doing good, man. There's no one doing bad right now at this moment watching the stream because
that's right.
Got some fun stuff going on, man.
Well, we got some good information to share, and it's always a pleasure to be on. And there's so much to talk about. I know that if you watch the wrong people, they'll kind of say that there's nothing to talk about, but trust me when I say that there's plenty to talk about in crypto right now. Dude, this isn't 2014 anymore, where there was only one coin and it was a question whether or not the government was going to bankrupt it all or not. It's a completely different setup, guys.
It's going to zero. It reminds me of the intro when the guy's screaming, "Bitcoin's going to zero.
Government's going to ban and steal you all your Bitcoins."
Going to zero. Nothing. Yeah.
So, I mean, hey, when in your opinion did crypto finally make it in terms of it won't go to zero? Like what give me a time frame. When do you think that happened?
I mean, I don't want to be cliche, but honestly, I was kind of skeptical getting into crypto in 2016. And then when I found Richard in 2017, I was like, well, this guy is rich billionaire genius even back then. Not a founder yet, but he seems pretty smart and he's a Bitcoin maxi. And I don't know. This seems like the market is just gonna, do what the market does. There's a lot of people interested in it. I think at that point, like 2016, I was like, yeah, I'll just whatever. This stuff's just to play around with. 2017, after I got a little bit of education, I was like, man, this is it ain't going to zero. I know. Like I think maybe 2020 is when it really solidified. 2020, 2022, even when things were going down, I was like, all right, it ain't going to zero. So I think there was definitely a learning period. But even back then, I remember thinking, even before we went back up in 2020, I was thinking, man, if Bitcoin goes to 1K, I'm buying it all. I'm buying everything because I had that much conviction even back then. But what about you?
So I didn't actually learn about Richard till 2019, and I think for me personally, when the bottom of the bear in 2018, when we were around like 3K, 3,200, I remember buying on Coinbase at 3,180. As a matter of fact, you could probably go find my buy transaction in there. It was so big. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, so big. Like what? The price was much lower than it is.
You could actually buy a whole Bitcoin for $3,000. Now Access is like 10 times that. Not quite. It was. But yeah, I remember thinking to myself, hearing price calls from traders like 2K is coming, 1K is coming. Those price targets never came. And so at the time I thought, there was still an existential threat and that it could go lower. But I think maybe the time for me that looking back now when it actually could no longer die was probably sometime in 2014 or 15, right after it survived the Mt. Gox crash and then the bear god whale, the god bear whale, finally got out of his coins. I think he sold like 36,000 Bitcoins in like a crazy short period of time, and they were trading at like $160 to $230 a coin or something. He was just nuking the price. So that dirty dude. But yeah, so I mean, maybe that time, sometime maybe in 2014 or 15 is when I think, it solidified that Bitcoin wasn't going away. And it probably was confirmed when Bitcoin hit $1,000 the second time, right in the beginning of 2017 or end of 16. I think it was end of 16, early 17. But, living through that cycle, the bear bottom there in 18 was definitely, for a lot of newbies, like it felt like it could still die. But by that point, the CME had gotten into the game, and I think that once they're in, it's had a low chance of death.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people remember the CBOE as the death cross, the down moment of like, oh, once it's in. I remember Richard streaming about that too. I also remember Richard crying. Anyone else remember that? I feel like I'm not like the only person who remembers him on.
I remember that. I've seen clips of it a lot, actually. I don't know if that's actually what. I don't know that. Like, obviously, he was pretty impacted by that. A lot of his like reputation and his value came from the price of Bitcoin. And he was probably heavily exposed, on leverage or something.
Do you ever think about that? Like, why? Was it? I always wonder. Like, was it for real? Was he kind of just going along with the emotions of everything else, not faking it, but just kind of like going along with the narrative sort of deal, or was he really like, did whatever else? Like, was there actually material impact from it? I always wonder, like, how legit was that session on with Ivan? I think.
I didn't watch it. I just seen the clips, and so I think maybe it was pretty legit. I mean, he obviously pretty torn up about Bitcoin because that was probably one of those times when he actually had to face the fact that Bitcoin wasn't going to be what he wanted it to be. I had to have that point. We all have to have that point where we're like, okay, Bitcoin is doing a good job of changing the power dynamic in the world, but it's just never going to be able to do everything, right? It's not going to be the everything money. And clearly, obviously, we're here with playing on a forked version of Ethereum. So,
well, would you like to have a come to Jesus moment about Hex Axis?
Let's do it.
No, that was rhetorical. That was not a serious way. I feel like a lot of people are having that moment, maybe unnecessarily, but it certainly feels like Hex just wasn't good enough. There's better stuff now.
Right, that it's old news and boring. And I've heard this from actual Hex OGs that Hex is boring. It doesn't do anything, or it's lost its allure. And I think that's wrong. I think based on what I'm seeing with the PulseChain ecosystem and some of the research that's being done, there's reason to believe that Hex is alive and well, not only from a market maker's perspective and from a longevity perspective, but also from a liquidity perspective. And what I mean by that is what's going to make Hex ultra valuable long term is that there's plenty of liquidity to extract value that doesn't affect the prices of everything. And part of what will make that possible is two dynamics. One dynamic is most of the weak money has been flushed out of the system, and for the amount of units that your average guy will hold or use or stake will just be in like the hundreds of thousands of units, and not so much the millions and millions, tens of millions or 100 millions of units of Hex, which will reduce sell pressure when you get to price targets like 50 cents and $1 and $5 and so on. But in addition to that is what's going on with the speculative stablecoin space, and how there is enough evidence now that if successful, PulseChain will have engineered its first, or will be the first chain to reverse engineer the Maker protocol and bring it online with a copy through its copied state, and come online with potentially billions of dollars of TVL, and then even beyond that, could be even as high as $1 trillion of TVL backing the DAI, known as pDAI, PUSDC, and PUSDT here on PulseChain. So that's an interesting thing.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know we'll get more in depth with it too, but I was just going to bring up just the liquidity play in general is something that I feel like every time we talk about, or like we have price go down for a minute, everyone forgets about the promise of liquidity in this ecosystem, how important it is, just what you're talking about. And I just wanted to highlight here that I took Richard's, masterclass here, brief masterclass in LP, reminding people how powerful it is, honestly telegraphing a lot of just amazing stuff that can be done with price directly, especially from benevolent whales who have a lot to manipulate the market. But
I like the word procure.
Yeah, procure. I was going to say influence. I mean, again, you could take the dip catcher stance of like there is no market manipulation. Everyone just plays with the chips they have. Honestly, I think there's something to that. But anyways, I ran this through the AI the other day, and it kind of elaborated and bring out some interesting things for the whole play here. And I'll just read for a second here. So based on the information in Richard tweets, here's how the theory of PulseX liquidity and price moves could affect PulseChain if large whales decided to buy a significant amount of PLS across major trading pairs. And again, don't take this as like perfect language or whatever. This is kind of just AI just reading into what Richard's talking about. It could lead into substantial increase in PLS price. It could be other assets and stuff too. According to Hart's explanation, doubling liquidity across those PLS trading pairs could call the PLS price to 4x. And this is an interesting part. So even relatively modest inflows of a few tens of millions of dollars could trigger large price spikes.
That's true. If you want to do an example, we can. Now, we can do an example. So if there's 2 pulse in the pool against $2, that just means that 1 pulse equals $1 because there's 2 units of each, so they're equal. The only way PulseX positions can get put in is in equal amounts. Whatever the ratio the market's saying, that's the ratio that anyone can put in. Everyone's held accountable to the same standard. That's what makes up the famous X times Y equals K. So if there's 2 pulse in the pool and there's $2, that means that there's $4 in the pool, right? Because you got $2 of pulse and $2 of dollars, that's $4. If you want to buy up one of the pulse out of the pool, you have to deposit $2. So if you put in $2 more, now you have $4, and you took that 1 pulse out. So now you have $4 in the pool and 1 pulse remaining, which the change there is a 4x change. So the ratio went from 50-50 to 25-75.
And that's the piece for the arbitrage. You talked about arbitrage here too. So like, how does that affect it? When people say that, okay, that's not right. Like we need to like go arb that out, or how quickly could that take place for as far as ratios?
Let's see. He says, however, Hart cautions that the relationship is not exact, as arbitrage bots would work to eliminate major price discrepancy. Well, so what this is basically saying is, in my example where there's $2 and 2 pulse, that's not the only pool out there. There's hundreds or thousands of pools with all sorts of different coins and all sorts of different ratios. So there's actively bots at work to, when somebody pushes through a buy, that buy gets spread apart. So it doesn't just hit our 2 and 2 pool. It's also going to hit perhaps other pools as well, to give you, the buyer, the best price possible. That's what order routers do, is they try to give you as the buyer or seller the best order execution, which means it's going to go seek out all the different pools on the network and bring you back the most coins it can at the best price, while accounting for slippage. That's where that word slippage comes in. So what he's saying is smart traders would likely spread their buying pressure across multiple pairs to reduce the impact, meaning either you're going to use an order router to do it for you, or you're going to manually go and set up buys on PulseX, 9mm, 9-inch for the same pair. So I'm going to go tack each different exchange separately, or I'm going to use an order router to spread my order across to get the best deal with less work. And there's reasons why you may do one or the other. An example I could say was the other day, somebody pushed a big buy through on the Axis token on PulseX, and it hit the Axis Pulse pair on PulseX and pushed the price up like 4%. And then another buy came in behind them that used an order router and not the PulseX pool directly through PulseX, app.pulsex.com. And the buy went through, and it was a bigger buy than the previous buy. So typically what you'd see is a bigger price spike. But when that second buy came through, the order router pushed it all through 9mm because the price was cheaper on 9mm, and it gave you more coins for the better deal, so that there was absolutely no impact on price on the main chart from PulseX. So when you're looking at a chart, you're only looking at that particular pool. So for each pool that exists, there's a different candlestick chart. So if there's 100 pairs for a coin, there's 100 candlestick charts, and an adept person will just find the deepest ones with the most liquidity, because those typically are the ones that get to hit the most, and gives you like the true price or the true price feed of where most of the transactions are taking place. But there are cases where if some of you idiots out there, no offense, are using just PulseX to transact, you're making a big mistake, because you're not getting the best price for you're not getting as much as you could, and you're creating discrepancies in price between pairs. So I highly encourage you that if you insist on playing with swapping coins around, use something like pDAI, like app.pDAI.io, because that's going to route your order from different areas. Or use Internet Money Wallet and use its in-app swap, because it's going to give you more coins for your dollar.
And this doesn't hurt PulseX. Everything still works fine. It'll route through there if the best price is there. It's just going to give you better experience as a user. So it's not like you're not using PulseX by doing that. You may not be using the interface, but you're still using the contracts and stuff if they get routed.
Yeah, it's a good point. If you're using pDAI, it's still going to find deals on PulseX. It's not going to ignore them. It's going to look at PulseX first, probably in a lot of cases, because that's where the most liquidity is. So
how does this affect the benevolent well actions too? Like, why would he be talking about that piece? Because at face value, it's like, okay, well, if we want prices to go up and keep getting bang, bang, bang with buys, why would we want to spread it across there? Like, wouldn't the price go higher by being inefficient?
Because buyers want as many coins as possible for as cheap of a price as possible. So when it says smart traders are going to spread their buying pressure across multiple pairs to reduce impact, it's basically saying, I'm a trader, I want to buy, but I want the most coins I can get, and I'd want to slip the price up as least as possible. So when you come in to buy, you don't want to make green candles, because otherwise you're not getting as many coins.
Well,
that's what this is saying.
The whales want the price to go up.
And then the catch-22 of that is smart market makers obviously are inclined to make the price go up, because it brings in attention and more volume and more interest. If there's not enough volatility on an asset, people get bored and they sell it off. So volatility in either direction is good, because it gives somebody something to trade to bring in more eyes, more volume, and more interest, which means sell-offs are good, and big pumps are good. Flat price action, like who wants to go trade dollars? Who wants to go trade USDC for USDT for DAI all day, every day, where you're trading for like fractions of a penny? Like, there's no gain there unless you're trading like $1 billion, right, back and forth, where you could make, like a fraction of a penny on $1 billion is still like potentially $1 million, right? But, and that's the big boys game. So the more volatility, the more of a little man's game it is, and the less volatility, the more of a big man's game it is in terms of the size of the bags that are required to make meaningful returns. What else do we have on this breakdown?
Yeah, the inverse leverage part I think is pretty interesting. The liquidity acts as inverse leverage. More liquidity reduces volatility, while less liquidity amplifies price swings. I can
more liquidity. Oh yeah, so the deeper, the thicker the liquidity, the less the price impact, which can be good, because if you want billionaires to get into your asset, they don't want to push the price up too hard, too fast. They want to accumulate a position first. So if there's deeper liquidity, it means that it smothers the ability for price to get volatile, move up and down. Whereas like if you remove liquidity, it makes it more choppy and more volatile, which gives more opportunity to the little guy. And so it's a fine line between too much and too little. And as you'll see in coins like my coin, like the Axis chart, or some of these other ones that have a lot of volatility in them, there's huge opportunity in those swings. And the periods where the price goes flat, you'll notice like the liquidity is thicker, and the periods where the price is very bouncy is when the liquidity is less.
Why do you think he would be talking about all this stuff in detail and making all these public moves that, we could see on chain, the buy? I mean, when I say he, I mean, whoever controls the keys, making the buys, has the side wallet, all that stuff. Could be Richard, could be anybody, could be a company, could be whatever. But just why does all this information being publicly presented? Like, what do you think is the message for like, is he just reminding us of what could happen? What we should have no expectations of, but like why make everything public? Why not?
He's just educating. I think he's just educating us all and reminding us of how the game's played and what to look for. So if you saw like all of the major pulse pairs drop by 50% in liquidity overnight, if the total pulse liquidity was like $100 million and you saw it drop to 50 million overnight, you could anticipate that, hey, there's going to be a big move coming because less liquidity, bigger price moves. But if it doubles from 50 million to 100 million, it just became like 4 times as difficult to push the price around. So think about those things. That could be part of it. I think that generally he wants people to be educated. Maybe he's also saying, hey, there's a lot of liquidity right now. If you remove some of your liquidity, it's easier to move the price, for better or for worse. Or, hey, there's a lot of liquidity right now. If you add more, we can like reduce downside from sellers. It depends on the angle that you think he's trying to say, because it could be different for every player. Ultimately this just gives the user base a better foundation and education to stand on to make decisions, I guess.
There's always this battle between people yelling, "Oh, there's not enough liquidity," and then people yelling, "Oh, you can think about these strategies. Oh, there's too much liquidity. The price can't move as much because it's so thick." How do you reconcile those two? Like, what is the right time to have a lot of liquidity and less liquidity, especially if we see whales out there with billions of dollars or millions of dollars that may be putting it to use? Like, when is the best time to have thick and thin liquidity?
So like you at the bottom of a range on a price chart where prices are starting to flatten out and volumes are starting to taper off, you want to see the liquidity thin, because then that means the pump back up can be bigger and faster. Whereas like after a big pump has occurred, you want to see somebody come in and add a bunch of liquidity to reduce the downside pressure. If you're a bull, if you're a bear, you have to reverse what I just said. So if you're a bear, you want to see very low liquidity at the tops of ranges so that, okay. If you're a bear and you're looking to exit and you're in something and you're looking to exit, you want that lot of liquidity up there at the top of a pump, because then you can sell into that and extract that value. If you're a bull, this is what makes market making hard, guys, is like if you're a bull, you want low liquidity at the bottom of a range where volumes are tapering off and the price is starting to go sideways so that you can get a big pump off that level. And then you want to come back in and backfill with a lot of liquidity after the pump's done so that you can get done with a round of a wave of sellers. And then after that wave of sellers is gone, you want to thin the liquidity again and pump it the next leg again, because like remember, if there's less liquidity, you can get another leg out of it, another pump higher with less economic energy input. So it's kind of like if you ever seen like a phalanx where like back in the days of the Battle of Thermopylae, and the Spartans would lock shields side by side, and then they would move up they would make a step forward, and then they would make a step forward. You could think of that as like the liquidity wall supporting the price behind where the price is at, and you'd want to have that there as a price support if you're trying to protect a range. Whereas like if you want to get the most upside potential, you actually have to remove your defense as well. So this is the thing, is like with liquidity, you have to remove your defense to go on offense. You can't have defense and offense both at play at the same time without inputting way more economic energy unless you're using single-sided liquidity. So this, because we're using double-sided liquidity, you do have to actively add and remove liquidity before and after moves to get the desired outcome. However, by using tools like 9mm single-sided liquidity, you can buffer downside but remove all the top side sell pressure. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. But what's best for price is actually double-sided equal liquidity, because it holds all players accountable who are going to provide the liquidity, because they would have to have equal amounts of both sides of the pair, and they can't just be like a net seller who could just put over, like what happened with the Soimi token, where price went up a lot. Sami got $5 million of this coin for free, dropped into his wallet. He put up a huge sell wall. It was a $68 million sell wall to basically stop the price in its tracks and kill the movement. But he had no skin in the game on the buy side. So if there was no Uniswap V3, he would have had to put up his own Pulse liquidity to pair it with $5 million worth at the time on both sides, which held him accountable to that move. But instead, because he used 9mm single-sided, he had to be not accountable at all. He could get these coins for free and just put that there and kind of kill the project. And that's what happened, for better or for worse. I'm not throwing shade on the guy, because he probably didn't know who made the coin, what the motive was, what damage that could do to his brand. And so I understand, why you'd want to shut. If somebody made a coin about me, I wouldn't necessarily support that either, because I didn't make it, right? So I understand that angle. But that's what happens when that kind of situation occurs, is if you put too much overhead sell pressure on single-sided and you're not accountable for the other side, you have no skin in the game. You just get to this is what's the problem with early the sacrifice phases and early drops and early buy-ins, is you're basically giving these people money with them having to put very minimal skin in the game in some cases, but then they can just be a problem for the project long term and just extract.
What do you think is more bullish, seeing liquidity being removed or being added for PulseChain at this point?
What needs to happen right now is dependent on the players that's coming in to move the price chart. So I don't really have an opinion one way or the other. I think just looking at the Pulse pair, there's the main pulse-dai pair, there's over $20 million on there. And that's fine. It'll, that's a healthy amount of liquidity to support the price at these levels. And it's also appropriate, because if you saw somebody inject $20 million, it's going to 4x the price. So if somebody came in here and put $20 million in here, price would get to 0.00037, which would be a new all-time high. And if somebody were to sell $20 million, it would cut the price by 75%. Theoretically, right? Because this is just this one pool we're looking at. It would drop price to new all-time lows, but they would also have to sell somewhere in the realm of 350 to 400 billion pulse. And it's not totally, the example doesn't totally make sense, because in this case, we're just looking at one wrapped pulse pool, and there's literally thousands of wrapped pulse pools that you could be tapping from. So there's probably, realistically, there's probably $100 million of pulse liquidity out there. So it kind of changes the price or the numbers I just gave you. But that's a general idea of what would happen on this particular pair, assuming this was the only pair that existed for Pulse and DAI and USD. $20 million to the upside moves price 4x. $20 million to the downside moves price minus 75%. Is that enough? Yeah, there's not very many people that have 300, 400 billion PLS. And to take that kind of risk to sell that off, that would get immediately bought back up, and they would lose their position in the game. Because you can't play the game like that, or you get left behind. There's enough hungry people that want that many coins at those prices. So if you were to sell it and to buy it up that high, you're taking so much supply off the market with that very little economic energy. that you'd probably create a higher price floor somewhere. And we'll see that happen here, where we've already seen this kind of a move happen between January 7th and January 19th, where there was $140 million of volume, and the price went up 211%. So you got a 3x on $140 million of volume. Over 50% of that was buy volume. So that means that there was about $75 million of buy volume for a 3x there. So that's kind of more in the realm of what you'd be looking for this next 3 to 4x, is probably $150, $200 million of volume in both directions.
Yeah, we saw the buys. I think the first time it became, I guess, obvious to everyone, evenly spread across in January across PulseX, Inc, Hex. 2 times. I think it was the first time in January, 2 times in February, around the same, and then 2 times in March. One was Hex only, one was Pulse only, and then what was it? Just 24 hours ago or so, we saw PulseX only. I'm just adding this up now. Is Inc next? Didn't even think about it. Like, it's funny, like how the single buys are happening now.
Yeah. I don't want to give away too much also, because I'm having these thoughts too. I don't want to give away too much of my ideas on what's going to happen. But I can say this, that PulseX and Hex are the ones that you could look to for action, because they're Hex in particular is so depressed. And I've said this before, like, for 1 year of ink yields in the farms on the ink pairs, you're making 10 times the amount you're making for a 1 year Hex stake right now. So that either tells me that the ink farms are overvalued, or the Hex price is undervalued by a factor of 10. So I think fair value on PHEX is somewhere around 10 cents, and we're just not there yet. But when that move comes, it'll probably happen pretty quickly. And on the ratio, like, it looks to me that Hex is actually starting to stabilize and go sideways. We're kind of done with that period of brand damage and, EHEX versus PHEX, and that's in the history books now. So I expect that, you should be looking at Hex right now, because if you acquire enough units now, and I know we're kind of getting off the topic of liquidity, but I think this is important. If you're acquiring Hex now and you get enough units at a penny, and then let's say theoretically this whole liquidity system builds up into the billions of dollars, or even $1 trillion, imagine that, you're going to have endless liquidity to sell into as a Hex staker. And the only ones that would have gotten rewarded are the guys that got their Hex today, right? The guys that got it now. Because by the time it's at 10 and 20 cents, you're going to get like 90% less coins for your dollar. And it's just going to be so hard to catch up to the guys that saw this coming early. And I think Storyteller on Twitter talks a lot about, if you can read the blockchain and you can see the bigger picture, that there's moves and battle shifts being put into position that's really setting up to look really good for Hex this cycle. And I wish everybody could just see and know that to be the truth. But, most people don't understand crypto. But anyways, back to this whole thing about what pairs get pumped and why. You don't want a really, really expensive Pulse price, but inevitably Pulse is going to go up a lot in price, because you want your gas and transaction fees low anyway. And PulseX and Hex have better tokenomics for price appreciation, and Pulse has not so good of tokenomics for price appreciation, from the angle of we should view Pulse as the gas and oil sector, and you want cheap gas and oil prices so that there can be more economic movement. There can be better, more commerce happening on our blockchain because it's more affordable to do so. Like, if gas prices gets too high in the world, people stop traveling, people stop putting gas in their car, they work from home more. If gas prices are low, people are more mobile, and commerce is at a higher clicking up at a higher tick. And you can think of blockchains in the same way, that they're just representing that same dynamic through the blockchain. But inevitably, because PulseX and Hex will be the levers by which the pumpage occurs, they'll amplify the gains on Pulse anyways, which is going to receive a lot of the pumpage anyways in a secondary way, if not directly from buyers. And then ink kind of, you could think of that as like it just sits on top of all of these and just gets like trampolined up because of the liquidity dynamics and the ratio of how that's set up in the farms. But probably too much to explain here on a public stream. If you want to know more about that, sign up for accessalive.com.
Just a quick comment on Hex as well. Hex has been bleeding against Bitcoin for a long time. Is that the common, I guess the outside view, or maybe just not looking at the bigger picture type of thing? Always see the comments of Hex down, 98%, 99%. And yeah, on a chart, right? You got to factor in all the stuff that's happened to it over time. You got to factor in what could happen to it in the future, the vibrant community, like all the fundamentals aside. What do you think when you see comments about like Hex is just down against everything else and why would it ever come back? It's always that question, like why would it ever come back? How do you think about that?
It's a damn good question. And after the recent stunt where eHex was in a perfect price structure and ready to go do a 3x, and years of down price action and underperformance versus BTC and ETH, and so many people basically losing faith or belief. I understand why, like the brand damage. You're basically saying, oh, the thing that was supposed to be a store of value on Ethereum is no longer a store of value. That doesn't, it doesn't sit well with a lot of people. So there's totally legitimate reasons for not believing in Hex and not seeing the vision and not wanting to have anything to do with it. And I sympathize with those people because I feel that way too, but I also have all the information. So they don't have all the information. They're looking at a price chart or a ratio, and then they don't know everything else that's going on in the background. That when you're investing in Hex, you're investing in the founder, and you have at least some inclination of what the founder's up to in the longer term vision and the statements that he's trying to make and the changes he's trying to make from a regulation point of view or from a decentralization point of view. And if he is successful on any of these fronts, the value of all of his tokens is going to go up tremendously. And if he's successful on multiple, he could be positioning all of us that's participating in these networks at the top and front and center of decentralized finance, which could basically take over cryptocurrency. And that's kind of was the aim of this conversation, was to talk about how that would even be possible and how many pieces are on the chessboard and in play currently to give Hex a run for its money, give Bitcoin a run for its money, and as Hex as the tool to get there. Hex is going to be supported by everything else that's going on around it right now, and the price is the last thing that's important. Because getting a price to move, if the Axis token or SolidX token or any of these other coins that have launched, PTGC, pDAI, if they're not proof enough that we can get a price chart to move, I don't know what to tell you. We already have done that enough with enough coins on PulseChain. Getting Hex to go to $1 is not hard to do. We just need to wait for the right timing to do it as an ecosystem. And so, this is like a once in a lifetime opportunity to acquire as many units of this as possible, understanding that over the long term, there's really not going to be another thing that's going to have as much liquidity in cryptocurrency to be able to buy and sell into and out of, and by means of huge adoption that comes after favorable outcome from the case, news precedent set and regulation that's going to give DeFi a place, and bring on all of these Web 2 developers to come into our ecosystem and other DeFi ecosystems to build for the first time ever. When we're looking at maybe 3% of all of Web 2 devs are on Web 3, you could see 20% potentially come in here, and you could see the renaissance of DeFi occur within the next couple of years if these things kind of fall into place. And and basically with Hex, you're taking a bet that Hex succeeds in fulfilling its role as the first ever blockchain CD with real long-term economic value and potentially billions, hundreds of billions even, or dare I say trillions of dollars of on-chain liquidity, because of the dynamics of what the OA is able to do with its supply, and by leveraging something like Maker, the protocol that's been forked from Ethereum to PulseChain.
Yeah, about to dive into that. Just real quick too. I just want to say that yeah, I definitely like the trustless yield, but I'm also long Richard Hart. So I think you can have both. You can hold two positions, and they don't have to be counter to each other. I think they can be complementary in a lot of ways, and it's just kind of what you discussed. But one more thing real quick too. I thought Richard had mentioned about suggesting that the Pulse, and maybe this is just pretty well known, I just want to bring it up too, that the hex on PulseChain circulating supply, or what's liquid, is significantly lower than on Ethereum because of the sacrifices that. I can't remember all the details, but I thought he suggested that in one of these posts too.
Let's see. You said that the hex supply on PulseChain is less.
Yeah, because even on this, it brought it. I was trying to find it in this post, but yeah, additionally, Hart suggests there may be less overall market supply of. I think it meant hex on this compared to existing hex token on Ethereum. I think it meant hex on PulseChain. I thought that was the.
Oh, okay.
Let's see. Let me just find hex.
That was probably in regards to how much hex was sacrificed, and just like
Yeah.
and then the fork occurring, and and potentially even, yeah. So that's kind of what I think's going on there. Is
I thought maybe he said it in a different post. I could have swore I saw him talk about that, and for some reason AI maybe got confused and it was talking about it in this conversation. But I thought it was something talking about there's less hex circulating on PulseChain than on Ethereum. Maybe, I think, due to the sacrifice in some way. I can't remember the details of.
Well, you can be assured that the whales are accumulating p-hex. They're selling the local tops and they're buying the lows, and they're not. And the guys that are buying it are not pushing the price up. They're just buying it at better and better prices. So that's going to absorb a lot of supply, and that's what you want to see. Is you want to see like bigger players absorb all that and give us more like runway. Like if you give enough broke people free 100x's, like it limits the upside potential.
50 weeks coming up, I think April 27th, I want to say. It'll be 50 weeks from PulseChain launch, in case anyone wants to keep that in mind or believes in that theory or otherwise. I think that's interesting. April could be exciting for a lot of different ways. I've been talking about April.
April's always interesting. It's been a historical moment for Hex. Year in and year out, it's always a big point, a pivotal point. Last year, it's when we crashed, right? We crashed from 12 cents down to, we were live with Sloth, you and I, and testnet v3 launched, and eHex never saw double-digit prices since then, nor has pHex, nor has the combined price. So,
wow.
But that was last April, so maybe it's time to go back the other way when things are looking so bad on the price chart. It's time to think about the counter trade. Think about Inc. at 39 cents, and everyone hated it. Dump Forever token, trash, and nobody wanted anything to do with it. And the supply was, and the market was so offsides on it that's what gave it such upside potential. And think about, yeah, of course, it's not an exact comparison because there's still a shit ton of people staking Hex and holding Hex versus Inc., which was much more not consolidated in fewer hands, believers, I would say. But still, it's still somewhat of an ancillary comparison there, where you can consider that there's just so many people that have been flushed out of Hex, and the sentiment is so bad that a nice pump, perhaps as early as the 8th or 9th, going into this Bitcoin halving, it could come. I'm not prophesizing that or expecting that or projecting that on anyone. It feels a lot like Hex it's about to get its day in the sun, I think. And in any rate, what's going on with pDAI could be a bullish reason why you'd may take a stake in Hex now before it gets expensive.
Yes. You got anything to share?
Yeah, just that. I mean, there's been a lot of research going on for, over 8 months now since last July when pDAI really kind of made its big ascent and went up like 2,000x, I think it was, with just insane price appreciation on pDAI.
I meant like your screen, or did you want to share your screen, or should I put something up?
Maybe we can just talk about this for a second and then we'll see where we land. But yeah, so the thoughts that I have on this is so how do we get to $1 trillion of on-chain TVL? Or just, let's not shoot so high. Maybe how do we get to like $50 billion of on-chain TVL? One of the ways you could get there is by rebooting the Maker protocol and collateralizing it with PulseX. And if your pockets are deep enough, there would be the ability to stabilize pDAI or PUSDC or PUSDT at $1. And what do I mean by that? The only way you're going to understand how this is possible is by first understanding, look, OA or SAC related wallets have touched the PMaker contract on testnet and on mainnet within hours after launch. It's interacted with the Maker protocol. There's verifiable proof of that. So there's reason to believe that with the activities we're seeing is that there's collateral being deposited in there to try to bring up the total dollar value backing pDAI. In addition to that, the mint function has been disabled so that people cannot mint pDAI to throw off the balance between existing pDAI supply and the collateral that backs it. And that's important because you wouldn't want to have a runaway inflation problem as we bring the value of the vaults from, $50 million to $100 million to $1 billion and whatever, so on and so forth, and just have these guys infinitely minting against that collateral that's in there. So disabling the minting function was important. So the way Maker works on Ethereum is you put Ethereum into a vault, just like think of it like liquid loans, because people understand liquid loans. You put Pulse or Ethereum into a vault. You can then mint a stablecoin from the value of that. If the value of your collateral goes below a certain threshold, you lose your cryptocurrency to stabilize the peg, but you get to keep your stables. The other side of that equation is if I have all this pDAI or DAI on Ethereum, I can go burn that and get the collateral back. If I redeposit the pDAI, that gets deleted, burned away. It basically de-issues that currency, and then it frees up my locked collateral. So this is the revolving door of how value is created and destroyed in terms of stable unit of account DAI. All that is possible on PulseChain with the Maker contract. And because this is my theory, now I'm going to branch out a little bit here and say this is my theory, not truth or fact. If someone like the OA who's got trillions of Pulse and PulseX chain and also has control of the governance module on Maker, can overwrite the code or change it to either back it with Pulse and PulseX or the forked wrapped ETH. I know it's getting confusing. You could put billions, I'm talking hundreds of billions of dollars of value in those vaults to back the existing 20 billion pDAI, most of which 12 billion, I believe, is owned already by the OA. So that would mean there's only a remainder of, let's just say, like 8 billion in the user supply pDAI, $8 billion. But if you back it with $400 billion, all of that could be converted into Pulse or wrapped ETH forked or whatever, and we could still hold the peg because there'd be like thousands of percent collateral ratio in there that you could never decollateralize and cause like a domino cascade effect or to break the peg. And yeah.
When would be a time to do that? Like would Pulse price have to go up a lot before it would make sense to do that, or would it make more sense to do it sooner?
So it's already begun. there's already collateral being deposited into the P maker vaults. There's PUSDC and there is, I think, pDAI, and there's the wrapped forked ETH. And interestingly enough, the wrapped forked ETH is at parity with Pulse. So by nature of the fork, the existing supply of wrapped ETH on Ethereum was, or all of the ETH was, wrapped ETH in this case, was duplicated onto PulseChain. And then that supply of ETH was then doubled and created Pulse token, right? And that became the gas token, but that didn't delete the wrapped ETH from the chain. That still exists there and is a contract. It just got its rights revoked to be able to be the gas token, and Pulse became the gas token. But that existing wrapped ETH supply still exists, and there's a bunch of it paired up in an LP pool, and wrapped ETH, the forked version, is tracking 1-to-1 the value of Pulse. So as Pulse goes up and down, so does the forked wrapped ETH at the same clip. So that based on the current governance rules of Maker, it accepts the wrapped ETH as collateral. So as long as it tracks the price of Pulse, you're basically getting the value of Pulse deposited into the vaults to back the value of the pDAI that exists, and of which I said there's about 20-ish billion of them. And so as over time, you're going to get a higher and higher collateral ratio as Pulse price increases in value, which means that at some point, when pDAI gets to $1, it can peg because the amount of, it'll be over collateralized to such a degree that nobody can depeg it because of how much wrapped ETH will be backing that value.
Wow. Yeah, it's, I guess, how would that, because there's, I guess, two different threads here too, of the idea that this could be, do we know if it's the benevolent whale or a benevolent whale's doing this, or do we know, or is it kind of a community thing that's enticing things to happen?
Yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down. So the Atropa ecosystem and that initiative is separate from what's going on with the P-Maker vaults. This is where people got shit confused for the last 8 months. Two different initiatives by two different parties that both initiatives happen to support the other one in the efforts to build up the liquidity to a huge enough number and burn it away to create called it the deep web, like the Atropa deep web of value in the treasury that's there locked away in LP pools that creates this concrete price floor that rises forever. That is a separate initiative from what's going on with, in terms of literal interactions with PMaker. I believe those are two separate parties. However, they do help each other because early on, that Atropa dev, who's now just became a face, was able to capture a lot of that pDAI supply on the lows and bond it with Atropa and burn that away. And based on how the mathematics is working, it's in a price positive feedback loop where with every iteration, more and more of that gets burned away and creates this like ever increasing mass of economic energy that's just going to sit there on the Pulse chain forever to be bought and sold out of. And the arbitrage bots are going to do their work to stabilize prices across all these burnt LP pairs. pDAI being a major part of that equation. So yes, they're not the same. They're not being initiated by the same parties. But they do help each other in the ultimate mission of this being the first on-chain with $1 trillion of value locked up, potentially.
So, yeah, so the value prop, I mean, value prop's one thing, but the other, I think, interesting part is a decentralized stablecoin. That's the theory I've heard floating around too. Is it, I mean, that's a first, right? Like a truly decentralized, not backed by, I think I was watching some videos or the other day of like having a stablecoin that's backed by collateral, not backed by like banks or otherwise. I know we have, DAI is kind of like that, but I think kind of like that. But I'm like, what admin keys with stablecoins that are backing some of that. Is that why it's like not totally cut off from the system? So like, could this be if pDAI pegs, and it becomes a stablecoin, all that stuff on PulseChain? Is that like the grandest vision we could think of as like, first of all, if you bought it from the lows, obviously the prices go up and price appreciation and stuff. but also having a decentralized stablecoin that kind of does fit with the narrative of true DeFi, right?
It's amazing. I don't think I've ever heard of anything quite so amazing happening before on any blockchain. I mean, you could argue that, you know, the original invention of DAI and the original code of Maker was pretty much as an amazing innovation for DeFi. And you could also argue that Uniswap was another amazing innovation for DeFi, real utility for Ethereum. We're just basically doing it again, reverse engineering it with all of the engines coming online at once, to basically become like this twin turbo network where it's like you got Ethereum and you got PulseChain, and they could talk to each other and both have a lot of the same functionality. And yeah, you did create theoretically dollars, the closest thing to dollars out of thin air by backing those stable units with like a circular value loop. It's because this whole chain was forked, it's interesting that it's even possible that you could basically, it's like lever up by bridging in stable coins to Pulse to start, and then give these things value, and then use that virtual value that's been driven here to back and create its own its own ecosystem, its own terrarium. It's like you're basically starting with just a little bit of bridged in, you know, real value, but what's real is the dollar liquidity. So with pDAI, or with the original DAI on Ethereum, the reason why that was possible is because there was real dollars backing USDT, or real dollars sitting on Coinbase or Kraken's balance sheet to back the value of the Ethereum on the centralized exchanges. We're just taking it a step away from that, and we're saying, okay, so then because Ethereum got a dollar price from those real dollars sitting in bank accounts, you could then collateralize it and create our own stablecoin with that collateral. But there always has to be way more dollar value in ETH locked in there to produce more stables. And I think there's like $5 billion in DAI on Ethereum right now. And which is pretty low. I think it peaked at 20 billion. So where am I going with this? I think we're going to do that, but we're going to do it a lot more. And you could think of these, you could think of PulseChain as fractionally reserving value away from Ethereum in the same way that banks fractional reserve debt and credit. We're basically doing that with assets, though, like crypto assets. It's pretty brainy stuff, and it's cool to be on the front edge of that for sure. It's like the idea of Hex succeeding as the first blockchain CD will work because this worked, because there will be enough liquidity there for, you know, Joe Schmo to stake for 5 years, and there's literally liquidity there for them, you know, after 100x or 1000x price rise to actually pull and not affect the peg, and not shoot the price down like crazy on some of these assets. What can make that a reality is enough units. Like the whole game has become units and size. It's amazing.
Do you think, I mean, if that actually took place, do you think some of the main pairs for the RH coins, instead of being mainly paired to Pulse, you think they'd be paired to, you know, some sort of stable coin like that, like we had on Ethereum? We had USDC and ETH.
Yeah, I think over time, people will get comfortable with the newly pegged. It'll go from being it went from being a meme to then it'll be a speculative stable like it is now, and then eventually it'll stabilize, and it'll take like 6 months or a year or 2 years for people to get comfortable with the fact that it actually pegged and it's going to hold, and then it'll become the norm, and then everyone will be pairing against it, and then we can totally decouple PulseChain away from any price action on legacy crypto if we're successful in this effort, because the dollars will be here in crypto. But that doesn't mean that we won't need more 0x coasts and other banking partners to, you know, rotate money in and off the chain. Of course, that's always going to be, there's always going to be a need for that. But I think the world in 20 years looks a lot different than the world of today, and that more people will be crypto friendly and they'll accept crypto as real value, and that won't need to be transferred into the traditional finance system anymore so much. So it's bootstrapping an entirely new financial system Very, very big idea, very big goals, but that's kind of what Richard's about. So it's not. It's the message has evolved so far away from just 10,000x. Like it's way sweet now.
Are you adding a zero? 100,000.
Well, the hex to $56 is a million x from the lows. So Bitcoin did 66.9 million x, and now it's up to 7.3 or 4 million x. So yeah, hex could do the million x for sure.
Just want to circle back here too. I think it kind of ties in a little bit. Just again, Richard taking over DeFi, and the DAI and stuff too. But it says here, as you can see, massive price movements up recently. And that's another thing. A lot of people have been tracking all this stuff. Again, public information on chain. He literally says here, as you can see, the massive price movements up recently. Doesn't really take millions to move to cause quite large movements up. You can literally see the money in the chart movements. It's obvious, measurable, mathematically defined. Everything here seems deliberate, calculated, with a plan. How do you make the case for the other side? How do you make the case that that RH is not here to take over? I don't see a compelling argument that all this just adds up to, yeah, we just go sideways for a while. Like, I just don't see the compelling argument for that.
Yeah, no, definitely not. I like to think about this from we can use other icons in the economy. Like let's look at Elon. Like, people bet on Elon Musk because he's an entrepreneur who's got a track record of success. If Elon died tomorrow, yes, his companies would live on, but would they have the same impact that they have now? And would they have the same driving force behind them? Probably not. Just the same with Apple. Like, Steve Jobs was Apple. He passed away, and they're still a very profitable company. But you could look at the price performance of the stock. It just doesn't do what it once did. And I think, outside of Richard Hart, dying or going insane, this is on a track to do bigger things than those two things financially. Not to diminish the impact of those other achievements from those kinds of guys, because they're equally as important. This is structurally and fundamentally going to change finance, and those guys structurally and fundamentally changed, aerospace and computing, home computing and portable computing, and they're all really big, important pieces of human history, and this just happens to be another piece of the puzzle that's getting laid into place. And he's basically saying here, like, look, you can see it. I'm not gone. You can see mathematically what happens when I make this move here or that move there, and that's just the observable ones that we can see on chain. It's like that on purpose, to teach and to educate, and he gets to say through movements on chain without saying with his voice the same message.
Do you think? I mean, I've been saying telegraph for a while. I think he's literally being like, "Hey, you guys ready? You guys ready? Are you sure? You sure you want to leave? Are you sure about that? Like, what do you look at what you're leaving?" It's almost like this, like kind of like in a blockchain message, like, look at what you're leaving. We'll look at what you're leaving. That kind of thing. I just can't.
Like that one tweet that he put about, like, oh, I thought you guys wanted to sell, and then the price pumped 80%. It's like, that's kind of him saying this here again, and he'll continue to say it because he wants the most people that can get in to get in. He wants to help people, right? Generally, he wants to help the single mom and the kid in college, and he wants to help people. Like, his biggest probably gripe right now is that not enough people are aping in, and that he's going to have to do this and leave a whole other class of people behind, and they're going to miss the first 100x. And he just wants more people on the subway train, right? And so he's trying to, shout as loud as he can without, getting himself into trouble with the regulators.
I think that's the thing. Again, people miss the most about, when they look at Richard. I don't know. Again, it's like one of those things. If you've been around for a while, you have to, at this point, look at the reasonable evidence that this guy is a good actor. He wants the values and the things that he wants to do in the world. He wants them to come true, and he's got the money and the power and influence to do it. So why wouldn't you do it? If you were in we almost said it too. It's like, I don't want to say it too much, but if you're in it for glory, what else is there but to go get it? And I mean, a guy in his position, we're lucky to have him. We really are. I think he's taken for granted way too much, which he did a tweet on the other day. The airline tweet, or that one. That was, I'll bring it up real quick. Yeah, what do you, well, maybe we'll end on this one too. I think this is kind of, hopefully a reality check, a wake-up call, another interesting one. Yeah. I once read a story about an airline losing someone's bags. The passenger was yelling at an overworked employee until she heard, "There's only two people in this world that care about finding your bags, and one of them is losing interest. Know who's on your team." Moral of the story.
Yeah. Yep. And I know a lot of people read that as like, oh my God, he's threatening to leave and quit, which I don't think that's what he's saying.
Really? That's a reaction? It never even occurred to me. I just thought, hey, check yourself for you rickety wreck your backs. That's a really high motive.
See, he says there's only two people in the world that care about finding your bags, and one of them is losing interest. Well, I mean, it's basically like that. Maybe he meant that as like, the user is the one losing interest. But that would be a total of 180 from the way I read that, which was he was losing interest. People read that as Richard was losing interest. But maybe what he meant was that the user is the one losing interest, because they don't have all the information.
I read it as just an example of what could happen in the real world that's analogous to, Richard wanting everything to go up and you with your bags wanting to go up, and just reinforcing this point. I think the story, again, I don't know how much we're going to analyze these tweets, but I think this was the story to put this message through. Know who's on your team. He's saying, guys, I am here. I want this thing to happen more than you probably. So let it be. That's the way I read it.
Okay. Well, I like that interpretation a lot more. So I know I started seeing people come in and say, "Hey, Richard, hope you're doing all right out there. Ignore the FUDsters. We're still here for you and support you and still believe in you." And so I saw those kinds of comments too. I did, maybe the last thing we can wrap on is somebody asked me to, is PulseChain and Hex and DeFi, is that a leading indicator of the overall crypto market, or is that a lagging indicator? And it's been kind of up for debate. And so I tried to explain this in a tweet today, basically how because DeFi is the liquidity and it's accessible like immediately, I think it tends to move quicker than the main crypto market. It's a theory. It's not, I can't prove it. I guess we could look and see whether or not Pulse or Hex moves before in one direction or another before Bitcoin and ETH move that in that direction. That's probably a good analysis for another time. But my gut feeling is that PulseChain is actually a leading indicator of what's going to go on with the rest of the market versus the other way around, because of the size of the players in it and because of how much drive and passion they have to get the outcome they want. And because that liquidity is on hand and ready to be, moved around at any moment's notice. DeFi is kind of amazing like that. It's instant liquidity, no matter what, and it's always there, 24/7, 365. Whereas, and I suppose that's true too of the centralized exchanges.
We're just not censorable though, unless you
right.
use swap front ends, and then just go to gorealdefi.com and click on that exchange link for Ethereum. That'll take you to a front end that's not censored, as well as Alex from Icosa has got one too.
Yeah.
What do you think, man? What do you think? April going to be a good month? It feels like a lot of cool stuff's happening.
Yeah, I don't think we're a good month to me would be upside, or just sideways even would be good. Even down, I don't even care. As long as you don't make a new low on the pulse chart, it's good. Everything's good right now. I feel for you guys that are in leverage positions or stuck in liquid loans vaults with a risky collateral ratio, or earn vaults with risky collateral, because these times are very uncomfortable. And I would encourage you to think about that before, think about that really good if you survive it, before you do it again next time. And because nothing just goes straight up. Like, if you're going to take a trade setup on something like that, like, be very, very conscientious of letting like at least 2 or 3 degrees of confirmation come through on the indicators or whatever method you do to strategize. A lot of you don't have it. You're just flying by the seat of your pants. And what worked for you in January obviously isn't working for you in March. You know what I mean? So it's like things change, and I'm here to support everybody and try to help them through this stuff. And once we're about midway through the month, I think we're gonna hopefully see some upside by then. It could even be as early as next week. April's always been a very interesting, pivotal moment for the Hex ecosystem.
Real quick question before we head off here from Wild SJ. Shout out to Wild SJ. What are your thoughts on adding LP right now? PulseX farms otherwise?
If you want Pulse and your time horizon is longer than 8 months, you could go into that pair. If you want PulseX and your time horizon is a few weeks, you could potentially DCA in to PulseX in the short term, because what I think is going to happen is PulseX is either going to hold here its ratio or slightly drop below down to like 3-to-1 before rallying hard. I guess it's always, those are always tough questions because I don't know what your goals are. Ultimately, this is what you need to know about providing liquidity is if you don't care if you get more or less of one coin or the other, and you just want to earn capital for just sitting on it, passive income, you could put it in the farms. If you don't want to end up with one over the other, you're going to want to pull that liquidity right before the big leg up, and you're going to want to look for news articles or things going on with the case or an upgrade to PulseX, or what's another bullish event that could occur? Some bullish event that would ignite a move that could go really far. And so you'd want to pull that LP position around that time frame to not risk impermanent loss to the upside on that next big leg up that's going to mark the price up a lot. No telling when that would come, but we're definitely at a key inflection point where Hex looks bottomed and PulseX looks good, but it could see short-term down, but it could see mid-term like explosion, right? And but ultimately everybody still wants more Pulse because that's the layer one, right? So the market's competing.
Bro. Need more ink.
Yeah.
Leverage
ink is
token.
sick.
Remember, you think it went from dump token to leverage token? I think that's the new thing.
Look, if any of those other 3 coins is going to pump, ink's going to pump. So,
okay.
Yeah. Watch for fundamental things going on with people that matter, not people that don't matter. With people that matter, like, first of all, how do you determine whether or not somebody matters or not? I mean, you could say Richard's probably one of the biggest, most pivotal figures. If he's saying something, like, listen closely, and if you see a reaction in price and you're not sure, pull down your liquidity. And there's like a few accounts out there on Twitter and a few people you can watch on streams that will drop hints about what they think they're seeing. It's not always 100% hit rate, but the good ones, like, they tend to know ahead of the curve by like a few days sometimes. So that's my thoughts on that.
Some of them come on this show, maybe
sometimes
every once in a while.
Maybe like 12 times a month or something.
think I want to count the number of times I should just look. This has to be like your 15th, 16th time. I don't know. You're definitely
24th or like 36th or something. I don't know. 56.
Like MVP in the last 18 months. Access Live is one of the biggest friends of the channel, as some would say, for sure. Coming on, dropping some hot stuff, man. What do you want to take us out on, man? Where can people find out more about your content and your last thoughts?
Yeah, if you want to learn, if you want to take your crypto game to the next level and get private, sessions with me once a week, and also daily market updates from some of the smartest people in crypto, go to accesslive.com and join the boardroom and swim with the whales. And if you want to capture as much information and pick up every little seed or nugget, check me out on the x.com/accessalive. I post less frequently than I used to, but when I do post things, they're usually of value. That's been my MO for going on 4 years. And if you go to the website and you go under the news logs feed, there's a blog post that got put up like 2 months ago about the deep web of Atropa. The title is the 414 Enigma, creating a perpetual motion machine on PulseChain. Click on that blog and understand how Atropa is actively trying to create billions of dollars of valuation locked away to give this whole entire chain a huge net of liquidity to buy and sell out of. And then if you want to find out where I stream on youtube.com/accessalive. I've been doing maybe like one or two. I've been doing like one a week on average on there, and then usually like one on some other person's channel. The one that I'm most interested in coming up is with Sonny and friends. Tokenomic might be on there, and his buddy that's a deep researcher on some of this on Vets and Crypto's channel. We'll do a dual stream on both mine and his channel. So that's some of the stuff that's coming up. And, I encourage everybody to just keep learning and go check out the Axis token, learn from it. There's so much in there. SolidX, the Fire Whale, just launched a token and it did like 1,000,000% in 24 hours. And people were fading me in the comments when I posted it last night, and it went up and did like a 4.3x or something after I posted it, after it had already been up like hundreds of thousands of percent. You want to learn from the people who have the economic power in the system, who are here to help you, not the fucking grifters and the shit coiners that just launch a coin and then think it's okay to. I mean, I could call out so many people, but you'll be able to look at a chart and know if that person that founded that coin cares about you and cares about their own reputation and their mission and their legacy just by looking at the chart. I will say this with confidence that let's not use the EHEX chart as an example of that from the point it's at now, but when we look back on all of these charts in 2.5 years, you'll be able to go back and say, yeah, I believed in that guy. He was honest and true, and he brought value to my life through cryptocurrency. And those are the guys that you want to back. You want to back them, you want to support them, and you want to be a part of their ecosystems, because they're the ones that's still going to be here in 15 years doing the same thing they're doing today. So anyways, I appreciate you for having me, Max.
Of course, man. Of course. As the title or as the channel description says, be the best version of yourself in the DeFi and crypto space. That's what I hope a lot of us are aiming towards. And yeah, good commentary. Great stream, man. As usual, everyone, if you're just tuning in, #replay gang and check out Axis's stuff. And wild ride. Hopefully have a good April 2nd. Let's have a good rest of the month, everyone.
All righty. Thanks. See you guys.
Scivive and 5555. We are out.